What if the family that raised you, the people who tucked you in at night, who taught you to ride a bike, who told you every single day that you were loved, what if all of it was built on a secret so dark, they needed you to keep it alive? That is exactly what happened to Ayla Whitmore. She grew up in a beautiful home in Greenwich, Connecticut. Her father was a senator. Her mother was grace personified. Their family was photographed, celebrated, and admired. From the outside, they were everything. But one evening, while searching for a document, Ayla opened the wrong drawer. I wasn't chosen. I was placed. Like a bandage over a wound they didn't want the world to see. What she found inside would unravel 30 years of carefully constructed lies, and lead her straight to the truth about a young woman named Elena Vasquez, who disappeared in 1995 and was never found. This is the story of what Ayla did next. How she stayed silent. How she planned. And how, in a room full of 600 people, she finally made them listen. Because some truths don't set you free. They just stop being lies. Ayla Whitmore is a 28-year-old woman raised in privilege, known for her calm composure and perfectly practiced smile. Beneath her polished exterior lies a growing restlessness, as she begins to sense that her life has been carefully controlled. When she uncovers the truth about her past, she transforms into a quiet but determined seeker of justice. The Whitmore estate sat at the end of Birchwood Lane like a painting no one was allowed to touch. 3 stories of colonial architecture, white shutters, a brass door knocker shaped like a lion's head. The neighbors called it the most beautiful home in Greenwich, Connecticut. They were right. They were also wrong about everything else. Inside, at 7:12 on a Tuesday morning, Ayla Whitmore stood before the mirror in her second-floor bedroom. She was 28, dark-haired, sharp-eyed, a woman who had learned to smile the way others learn a second language. Technically correct. But never quite native. She held a photograph. It was old, creased down the middle, as if someone had once tried to fold it away and thought better of it. 2 people standing in front of a hospital building. A man in a charcoal suit. A woman young, slight, dark-haired. Between them, nothing. Just space where someone used to be. They always said I was chosen. Special. A blessing they waited years for. Funny how lies sound so beautiful when you grow up believing them. The man in the photograph was Senator Richard Whitmore, her father. Connecticut's most beloved public servant. Champion of family values. 4-time winner of the State Ethics Award. The woman standing beside him was not her mother. Ayla had found the photo 6 months ago, tucked inside an envelope, inside a book, inside a locked drawer. 3 layers of burial. Whatever it meant, someone had worked very hard to keep it quiet. She placed the photograph face down on the dresser. Downstairs, she could hear her mother Margaret Whitmore moving through the kitchen. The deliberate click of heels on marble. The careful sound of someone who has performed mourning so many times it has become choreography. Ayla, darling, Margaret called up, her voice warm as a fireplace, breakfast is ready. Your father has a press conference at 9. Ayla looked at herself in the mirror one last time. Coming, Mom, she said, and the smile arrived exactly on cue. It started, as most unravelings do, with something mundane. 3 weeks later, Ayla was searching her father's home office for the deed to the lake house. Richard Whitmore trusted his daughter with these tasks. She was organized, discreet, meticulous. He had no reason to suspect she was also, very quietly, paying attention. The filing cabinet's bottom drawer was locked. She had never noticed that before. Or maybe she had, and simply never asked. The key was on the same ring as the one for the garden shed, such a small, forgivable oversight. Inside the drawer, a manila folder, thick with age. No label. Her hands were perfectly steady when she opened it. Later, she would think about that, how she didn't tremble until the 3rd page. The hospital records were dated September 14, 1995. Baby girl. Mother, Elena Vasquez, age 24. Father, listed as unknown. But clipped to the back was a legal document bearing Richard Whitmore's signature, and a court order dated 4 days later, transferring full custody of the infant to Richard and Margaret Whitmore. No adoption hearing. No public record. Just a judge's signature and a line that read, "Matter sealed per mutual agreement." Ayla sat on the office floor for 11 minutes. She knew because she counted the seconds on the grandfather clock across the room, tick, 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 like a metronome keeping time on the end of her life as she knew it. She wasn't adopted out of love. I wasn't chosen. I was placed. Like a bandage over a wound they didn't want the world to see. She photographed every page with her phone. She replaced the folder exactly as she'd found it, same angle, same slight curl at the left corner. Then she found the lake house deed, took it downstairs, handed it to her father, and smiled when he said, "What would I do without you?" "I don't know," she said pleasantly. "Me neither." The name on the birth record was Elena Vasquez. Ayla spent the next 2 months becoming a different kind of daughter. On the surface, attentive, gracious, attending every dinner party, every campaign fundraiser, every Sunday church service with her parents. Photographed often. Quoted sometimes. The perfect Whitmore girl. Underneath, she had become an archivist of her own origins. She drove to the Hartford Public Library on 4 separate occasions, using a guest pass under a variation of her name. She searched newspaper archives from 1994 to 1996. What she found made the filing cabinet feel like nothing. October, 1995. Hartford Courant, page 11, young woman reported missing after political fundraiser. Elena Vasquez, 24, a clerical assistant at the state capitol, had last been seen at a private fundraising event hosted by then State Representative Richard Whitmore. She was reported missing by her roommate. The investigation lasted 9 weeks. It was closed, quietly, with no charges, no body, and a note in the record that read, "Matter referred to private counsel per department directive." Ayla stared at the microfilm screen for a very long time. Elena Vasquez had been pregnant when she disappeared. The timeline matched perfectly. Ayla's birth. The sealed custody order. The woman who was never found. She drove home in silence, parked in the driveway, and sat for 20 minutes watching the lights inside the house move from room to room, her father in his study, her mother in the sitting room, 2 silhouettes behind glass, performing the roles they had performed for 30 years. Then she went inside, kissed her mother on the cheek, told her father the caterer had confirmed for Saturday's gala, and went upstairs to plan the most important thing she had ever done in her life. They built a perfect life on a lie. I was the lie. I was the evidence they buried, and then dressed up in cashmere and sent to private school and taught to smile for cameras. I was the proof of what they did, hidden in plain sight. And I had been playing my role beautifully. The Ayla who existed before October became something more precise after it. She stopped feeling her grief in the daytime. She saved it for 3 in the morning, when the house was dark and she could sit by her bedroom window and allow herself 10 minutes of falling apart before she reassembled herself and went back to work. She located Carol DeFazio, a retired Hartford detective who had briefly worked the Vasquez disappearance before being transferred off the case. Transferred, Ayla noticed, exactly 2 weeks after Richard Whitmore had donated $40,000 to the Police Benevolent Fund. Carol was 71 now, living in Wethersfield, still sharp and still angry about the case she'd never been allowed to finish. They met twice at a diner off Route 5. Carol handed her a photocopy of her own personal case notes, the ones she had kept when the official file went missing. She contacted Marcus Reed, an investigative journalist at the New Haven Register who had written a single-paragraph follow-up on Elena Vasquez in 2008, and then, he told Ayla, received a cease and desist from a Manhattan law firm within 48 hours. He had kept every document from that story in a fireproof box under his desk for 17 years. Waiting. And she drove to New Britain, to a small house on a quiet street, and knocked on the door of Dolores Vasquez, Elena's mother, who was 83 years old and who had a box of her daughter's belongings, including 3 letters written in Elena's handwriting. The last one dated 4 days before the fundraiser. One letter was addressed to a man Dolores had never been able to identify. The envelope bore only initials, RW. Inside the letter, tucked between 2 pages, was a faded Polaroid photograph. A young dark-haired woman, unmistakably Elena, standing beside Richard Whitmore at what appeared to be a private party. She was visibly pregnant. He had his hand on her shoulder. They were both smiling. On the back, in Elena's handwriting, he says he'll take care of everything. I believe him. She had underlined the word everything twice. Ayla pulled over twice on the drive home. That night, at dinner, her father told a story about a young intern who reminded him of himself. Her mother laughed in exactly the right places. Ayla ate her salmon and said, "You always did know how to inspire people, Dad," and he beamed at her across the candlelight. There were moments, she would admit this to no one, but it is true, when doubt crept in through the edges. Flashbacks arrived without warning. Her father crouching beside a broken bicycle on the driveway of their summer house in Cape Cod, grease on his fingers, patient and laughing. Her mother staying up past midnight to finish sewing a Halloween costume because Ayla had changed her mind about what she wanted to be. Christmas mornings when the love in the room had felt, to her child's heart, completely real. Were any of those moments true? Or were they the best scenes in the longest performance I had ever witnessed? And if they were real, does it matter? Can love exist inside a lie? Can it still count if the foundation beneath it is a woman who disappeared and was never found? She didn't have answers. She only had evidence. And evidence, she had come to understand, does not care about your feelings. The grand ballroom of the Omni New Haven Hotel on April 19 was everything the Whitmores had always built toward. Crystal chandeliers. 600 guests. Senators and judges and CEOs seated at round tables draped in white linen. News cameras from 3 networks stood at the back. The room smelled like old money and new ambition and the particular kind of certainty that comes with never having been held accountable for anything. Richard Whitmore was being honored with the Lifetime Achievement Award in public service. It was his night. He had planned every detail. Including, at his own warm insistence, having his daughter give the opening remarks about family, and love, and what it meant to be a Whitmore. He had written her speaking notes himself. She hadn't looked at them. Marcus Reed was at a table near the back, press credentials on his lanyard, a recorder in his jacket pocket. Carol DeFazio was in the lobby with a folder she would hand to a Hartford Courant reporter at 8:45, 15 minutes after Ayla took the stage. Dolores Vasquez was home in New Britain, phone in hand, watching a live stream that Ayla had quietly arranged. Everything that mattered about the Whitmore name was in this room. Ayla walked to the podium in a navy dress and pearl earrings, dressed exactly as her parents would want her to dress, one last time. She adjusted the microphone. She looked out at 600 expectant faces. She found her father's eyes in the front row. He was smiling. So proud. So certain of her. She smiled back. And then she began. I used to believe I was the luckiest child alive. Adopted by 2 people who saved me. That's the story I was given. That's the story I told myself every time something felt wrong, which, looking back, was always. A pause. The room was utterly still. My name is Ayla Whitmore. Or it was. Before tonight, I want to tell you my real name. I am the daughter of Elena Vasquez, a 24-year-old woman who worked at the state capitol, who fell in love with the wrong man, who became pregnant, and who disappeared 4 days before she was supposed to leave Connecticut forever. She was never found. No one was ever charged. The investigation was closed by people who were paid to close it. Murmurs moved through the room like a current. I have hospital records. I have a sealed custody order bearing my father's signature, executed 4 days after Elena Vasquez disappeared. I have a photograph, taken at a private party hosted by this man, in which Elena Vasquez stands beside him, visibly pregnant, smiling, with his hand on her shoulder. And on the back of that photograph, written in her own handwriting, he says he'll take care of everything. She underlined the word everything. Twice. She looked directly at Richard Whitmore. His face was doing something she had never seen it do. The certainty was leaving it. The warmth was leaving it. What remained underneath was smaller and older and frightened. He did take care of everything. He took care of me. He gave me a beautiful life, a perfect life, with perfect dinners and perfect smiles and a home that looked, from the outside, like a blessing. And he buried the woman who gave birth to me somewhere no one has ever looked, because no one was ever allowed to. The room did not erupt. It did something worse. It went completely silent. In that silence, Margaret Whitmore reached for her husband's arm. He didn't take her hand. From the back of the room, Marcus Reed was already transmitting. In the lobby, Carol DeFazio handed over her folder. In New Britain, an 83-year-old woman watching a tiny screen pressed her hand over her mouth and wept, for the first time in 30 years, because someone had finally said her daughter's name out loud, in a room full of people who had to listen. The investigations began within 72 hours. The FBI reopened the Vasquez disappearance on April 23. The sealed court record was subpoenaed. 3 former officials who had worked the original case retained attorneys by April 25. Richard Whitmore issued a statement through his legal team that said he was deeply committed to cooperating with all relevant authorities. He did not appear in public again that month. Margaret Whitmore called Ayla on the morning of April 21. The call lasted 4 minutes. Margaret said several things, about loyalty, about ingratitude, about what Ayla had done to their family. Ayla listened to all of it. Then she said, "I know you didn't know everything. I've thought about that a lot. I need you to know I've thought about it." Then she hung up. She drove to New Britain on April 24 and knocked on Dolores Vasquez's door. The old woman opened it and looked at Ayla for a long time, at her dark hair, her dark eyes, the shape of her face, and then she stepped aside and let her in. They sat in the kitchen for 3 hours. Dolores showed her photographs. Ayla asked questions she had been carrying for months. Some had answers. Most didn't. When she left, Dolores held her hands at the door and said something in Spanish that Ayla didn't fully understand, but she felt it, somewhere precise and unnameable, the way you feel a door opening in a room you forgot existed. 3 weeks after the gala, Ayla stood in her childhood bedroom, packing the last of what she would take. The photograph, the original, creased one from the beginning, was in her hand. The man in the charcoal suit. The slight dark-haired woman. The empty space between them where Ayla would have been, if things had gone differently. If a different choice had been made. If a woman had been allowed to live. She had thought, once, that exposing the truth would feel like relief. Like finally setting something heavy down after years of unknowingly carrying it. I thought exposing them would give me peace. But all it gave me was the truth. And the truth, the whole, actual, unbeautiful truth, is that I am the daughter of a woman whose name I am still learning to say. I am the child of a crime that went unpunished for 3 decades. I am not the lucky one. I am not the chosen one. I am just a woman standing in the wreckage of a beautiful lie, trying to figure out what's worth keeping. She put the photograph in her bag. She picked up the single suitcase she'd packed. She walked down the stairs of the house on Birchwood Lane for the last time, past the brass lion knocker, past the white shutters, past the perfectly maintained hedges, and she got into her car. She drove away from Greenwich without looking back. She drove north, toward New Britain. She had a grandmother she was just beginning to know. And somewhere ahead of her, not healing, not closure, not the clean ending she had once imagined, but something smaller and truer, a name that finally belonged to her, and a story she could tell without lying. And the truth doesn't always feel like freedom. But it is still the truth. And that, for now, is enough. For Elena Vasquez. Who was never found. But is no longer forgotten.